right. Well, it's good to have you guys on here. We're going to pray and then we'll dive into your work today. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to meet with these churches. God, we are so honored and blessed by the fact that you have entrusted into our hands the opportunity to partner with you to bring the life giving message of Jesus Christ in the lives of those in our communities. And Father, I thank you for this journey that we're starting on today, learning how to disciple leaders, learning how to build a culture of leadership development in our churches. And Father, I ask right from the beginning that this would be a landmark training for each of these pastors, each of these leaders, each of these churches, that you would do something foundational in these churches as they go through this process, that they would see true transformation happen in their own lives and in their own skills, but also in the lives of their churches. So, Father, we just commit this time to you and ask that you do that which you do. And we trust you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Oh, let's see. We got a couple more people in the waiting room. Let me let them in. All right. So we'll get rolling. So you guys, welcome. It's good to see you again. I met many of you at the orientation when we did just a little 30-minute kickoff telling you how this whole thing works. And today is our very first coaching session together. So if I've not met you yet, I've met you on you met me on the video. My name is Mac, and it is so good to be with you today. I absolutely love this process. This process was birthed out of my own pain, out of my own struggle, out of my own heart cry of saying, we don't have enough leaders. I'd planted a church in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We were reaching people like crazy, baptizing people. And I was like, I don't have anybody to disciple these people. And so that set me on a journey to research, how did Jesus disciple leaders? And that research, that study revolutionized the way I look at leadership development. And so from that point on, the next several years, I began to experiment, begin to try this, that, and the other, see what worked, what didn't work, tried a lot of things that didn't work, and stumbled on some things that did work. And, bottom line is, I'm so glad, just reinforced for me that leadership development is relationship. It's discipleship, and it's a discipleship relationship. And so begin to learn and grow and implement this and begin to see results and begin to see leaders change and transformed, eventually put this process together. And one day just was talking to a church. I said, hey, let me run this by you. And I ran them through this entire process in 2 days, which was way too fast, but they loved it and saw some real transformation. And so began to experiment with it. And here it is, 10 years later, I've taken hundreds of churches through the process and seen a lot of transformation. I was on a call this morning. I spoke at a conference in Australia this morning, and it was with one of the churches that I flew over to Australia in 2019, took them through this process and coached them for a year to help them build it out. And I spoke at their conference today, and they announced just before they put me on the screen that they had 73 new leaders who had been apprenticed and discipled in leadership, that they were installing in leadership. And that just tickled my heart to hear that type of thing. And that's the type of thing I hope and pray that you will begin to experience as well. Now, they're a church of 1,000, but no matter the size of your church, I've seen this work. I talked to a church 2 days ago, a church in Boulder, Colorado, Parker Manuel and Jess Manuel. They have seen, I think in a year, over 60% of their adults have been through the leadership development training and pipeline. And it's just the results they're seeing is just crazy. So I'm praying for those same results for you guys, that you'll see the value of this and get some traction with it. Now, I've got 4 objectives for today. And objective number 1 is for us to get to know each other even better. So this is going to be interactive. So I'll be asking questions, ask you to unmute and respond. You can stay on unmute unless you're have a lot of background noise, but I just encourage you to unmute and stay on unmute so you can just jump in and participate. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. So that'll help us get to know each other better and learn from each other. Second objective is to help you refine your definition of leadership development. That's one of the things you worked on, and I'm going to have you share that, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And then third objective is to identify and assess your current leadership development approaches. What are you doing well? What's working well? What are some of your strengths? And then the fourth objective is help you pinpoint where you need to grow and some tips for how to grow through some of those weaknesses. So I encourage you guys, I'm not going to be teaching through an outline or anything like that during this time. So I encourage you, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, capture insights as we go through the process. So the way this works, I just sort of guide you through the videos that you went through. I sort of guide back through those things and ask some questions based on those. And as you have questions along the way, please just insert those in and ask those, and we'll continue to learn and grow together. So so when you watch the introduction video, one of the very first things I ask you to do is write down, why are you excited about going through this process? Why are you excited about going through this process? So I would love to hear from a few of you. And what makes you excited about going through this leadership development, this leadership pipeline, this leadership development process? Anybody just jump in.
I'm super excited because I think it means something new for our church. So where our church currently is, man, we are stagnant with leaders and we're seeing a lot of burnout. So I believe this is one of those ways to where, even watching the video, I had a chance to hear you express, man, get a chance to really think in the vein of, man, what are the passions, what are the desires that are in the church, and how can we take that and put it through a tried system so that they don't end up getting burned out at the end, but they end up getting even on fire for what God has called them to do, which ends up blessing the church and their community and everything else around it. So I see this as an opportunity for the church to really blossom and bloom. I would say our church to blossom and bloom.
Yeah. Richard, you said that your church is stagnant with leaders. If you had to assess how it got there, what would be your diagnosis? How did it get to where it's stagnant with leaders?
Oh man. So with us, we're an interesting story, right? So we're a church revitalization. So we went through different steps. So when we first got there, the church had 11 people. So you kind of had to work with what you had. Then people started coming to the church. So now the church is a little over 200. So when you had that big boom, leaders were doing, the little bit of leaders you had were doing everything. Wow. And then those leaders started getting burnt out. So then as soon as you started recruiting more leaders, as more leaders came in, more leaders were leaving. They didn't leave the church, they stayed, but they were just cycling out of leadership to where you got kind of stagnant to the point to where you had a good group of people who were saying, man, I'm with you. Let's go. Let's take this all the way. And then you had a group of people saying, man, I'm tired. So things just kind of hit a ceiling. And that's when we realized we just can't continue that way. So that's how it kind of got to the way it is now.
Richard, what's a leadership lesson that you take away from that as you look back over the last 18 months or so, and you look at that situation? What's a leadership lesson that you learned through that?
Man, don't seek to fill spots. To be honest, that's one of the biggest things. I was looking at the church is growing, man, we need someone to fill a position to accomplish a certain need. And selfishly, if I can be honest with you, sometimes to even take pressure off of me, because I end up being the one doing everything that kind of has that gap that doesn't get done by someone else. So I'm like, man, I need help. I need someone to fill a gap. But now I'm to the point to where, man, it's not about filling a gap. I really need to find individuals that are passionate and teach them and mentor them in how to be consistent and have longevity in that role.
Yes, yes. I did an interview yesterday. I'm doing these YouTube interviews, and I interviewed a young man that I've known for 11 years. He's a church planter in Memphis, Tennessee, and he had planted another church and led it, but struggled with leadership development.
Mm.
And what's funny, in the interview, I was asking him about it. He said, Mac, I knew all the right answers. He said, I had mentored him. He said, I learned from you. I knew the right answers, but when I was leading that first church,
two names down.
Sunday was everything. Sunday was everything. And he said, I just couldn't make time for development. I knew it was important. I knew why it was important. I knew how to do it. But the urgency of Sunday, I just kept being pulled by that magnetic pull. He said, now in this new church, he said, I decided to do it different. This new church plant, I decided to do it differently. And he did. And he began to just pour into a key group of people. Richard, it's crazy. His church has exploded. It's exploded. And I told him, I said, here's what, before you were praying that God would add a bunch of people, but you weren't doing your part of stewarding the development of those that were there to receive that which you were praying for. And so many times we're praying, God, send us more people, and God's going, I would if you would steward that what you have, that which you have. And so God's going, hey, if I try to fill your cup right now, you got so few, it's going to fill up fast. So, put some more cups out, prepare some more leaders. So good stuff, Richard. Thanks for sharing. Somebody else, why are you excited about going through this process? Tell us who you are and what church you're with too. Yep, go ahead.
I'll talk. Jake Perkins, Canadian, Texas, the Canadian Church of Christ. Man, and Richard, thank you for those words. I'm just sitting over here like, preach, brother. You were bringing it, and appreciate that so much, because that's it, right? We taught our church. We've been an established church. This church was planted late 1800s off a train by a few women who came out to the Texas Panhandle, and started meeting in a house. So we have a long established relationship here, and this church is unique in that we make up about 10% of our town goes to church with us. But over the last year during COVID, we taught them how to consume instead of be a part. We inadvertently didn't want to, but everybody did that, right? We taught people how to tune in, and we weren't necessarily developing leaders before, but with an intentional plan. But we definitely, I guess, just ramped that up. What we were lacking got ramped up during COVID, and so we're excited about it. I mean, what happened in our first meeting was we had 10 people, staff members. We're a shepherd-run church, elder-led church, and several of our elders there, staff, key people. And it was 10 of us, and everybody at the end of it was like, we got to have more people in this thing. So we've expanded by 8 more and caught them up, and just getting more and more people on board, because we saw the desire and the hunger for this. And so we're excited about that. We know we got a lot of work to do, but really excited about it.
Oh my goodness, Jake, you get volunteer leaders excited about this. Watch out. It's powerful. I've seen this where I'll go on site and do this. And most of the time when I'm on site, it's larger churches and it's just their staff. But every once in a while, I'll show up to one of these larger churches, and they've invited some of their volunteer leaders in, and they gobble this up. They're like, yes, we want to do this. And it's the staff. Interestingly enough, so many times it's the staff that's hesitant rather than the volunteer leaders. So I'm glad you expanded that circle. If you had that good of a response, I'm glad you expanded that. That shows them taking some ownership. It's really good. One more. Somebody else. Why are you excited about the process?
Hey, this is Daryl Williams in Raleigh, North Carolina, at a Sing Worship Church. I think I'm excited about turning our swamp into a river. Right now we have kind of a swamp where, we're a church plant. We started in 2020, and we started online with some core group people that had done evangelistic outreach before, but not the consistent week-to-week ministry. And the outreaches we did were maybe 3 times a year versus the week-to-week dynamic of pastoral and church ministry. So so we're kind of all over the place. We have leaders that are doing small groups. We have some leaders that will pick up projects here and there. If I ask them to do something, they'll do it. And it's a group of about, I'd say the leaders are they're all volunteers, but it's about 30 of them. And if we could harness and focus our game plan, our systems, our approach, our organization, our structure towards something that is defined, we'll raise the banks, of the ministry, and then we can turn that swamp, that's just, it's things floating around in there, but you don't want to swim in it, so we want to make it so this thing is going somewhere. And I know that the key to that is in having, a strong leadership structure. I've been on staff as a staff pastor before, assistant pastor on staff before. And so I, had strong leadership team. Then I know that the key to, us being able to meet the potential that we have is in really developing leaders. And the good thing is we have a blank, with the church plant that started in COVID, we have a blank sheet of paper, so we can really define that without any preconceived notions of what that should look like. And so it's really just, how do we, figuring out the path to raise those banks, and so that this, kind of space where water is can be focused to go where it can go and bring life to people.
Love that. That is so good. And I love your analogy, turn your swamp into a river. I love that word picture. Goes back to what Richard's talking about, that stagnation. And you don't want that stagnation. You want movement. Let me give you guys a couple principles based off of what Daryl just shared. Number one, a lot of times pastors thinks it requires vision to scale what you're doing. Vision is important, but structure is what allows you to scale. Structure allows you to scale, not vision. And so many times a pastor will have a huge vision, but not the structure to accomplish that vision. And so in the very next session, you're going to be looking at how your church is structured. And again, Daryl, I love the way you describe that, raising the banks, because what's going to happen as you begin to identify your leadership pipeline structure over my left shoulder here, as you begin to identify that structure, you're going to begin to recognize some places where more people can get involved and more people can lead at higher levels of spiritual leadership, and that's going to be hugely helpful. The second principle I want to share with you, and again, it's based on what you said, is stagnation repels, momentum attracts. Stagnation repels and momentum attracts. You said, you look at that stagnant water, nobody wants to go swimming in there. You don't know what's in there. It looks dangerous, and people know that. But man, you see a nice flowing stream, you go, man, that looks like it's going somewhere. It looks like something I want to get into. And so building this momentum, man, it's going to really attract. And Jake already saw that session one, the people that sat there, all of a sudden, the concepts that were talked about, it built this sense of momentum. And they're like, let's pull some more people into this. Let's invite, because they feel good about pulling people into something that's going somewhere. But when we're stagnant, nobody invites people into that, So, good stuff, you guys. I want to transition and I want to talk through.
Guys, talking about leadership. his name is Matt Clay. You ever heard of Matt Clay?
Dan, you might want Dan, you might
muted.
want to mute your line.
We didn't want to hear the answer. Have you ever heard of Mac? We didn't want to hear that answer.
Yeah, I tried to get him
No.
muted before he said he responded.
Yeah.
That was a good catch, bro. Good catch.
All right. In the video, in the culture video and the introduction, the introduction video gave you a few tips to get a good start. Tip number one was be open to a shift in your perspective. Be open to a shift in your perspective. And I talked there about, being able to identify what is your leadership development strategy. You want to be able to articulate that. You want to be able to be intentional about that. When you make leadership development intentional, that's when you can make it reproducible. When it's reproducible, it becomes unstoppable. So that's why it's important to shift your perspective and go, you know what, we've got to define what leadership development is, what our strategy is, and not only what our strategy is, but why are we doing it? Are we doing it, as I said in the video, because of my pain, or are we doing leadership development because of their potential? And those are two totally different motivations, and motivation matters. When it comes to leadership development, motivation matters. So we want to change our perspective. Tip number two was be honest with yourself. And in this one, I talked about my 3 conversions. My conversion from lost to found, doer to leader, leader to developer. And I ask you as a team to capture your own leadership your own 3 conversions. And obviously not everybody has had all 3 of those conversions. Hopefully everybody in your room had the first conversion, but they may not have had the second or the third. So we ask you to share that with each other. Share your stories with each other. Be honest about where your starting place is, and then to share each other's stories, and then glean some insights about what do you learn about leadership development as you listen to my story and each other's story. What were some of those insights that you gathered as you talked about the conversions? I'd love to hear from a few of you.
This is David Grigsby. Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you, David.
Okay. Just a couple of things that stood out to us in our group was that for them to be developed into either a leader or developer of leaders, their secular jobs and training really helped them with that. And also the deeper that they got into discipleship as they matured in Christ allowed them to step into a leadership role. We're talking about a room full of, probably half full of brand new leaders, and then the other half pretty mature leaders that have been leading at some capacity in a while at the church that I'm at. So, and they also, one of the key takeaways that almost everyone said is, as they learn to grow themselves spiritually, it helped in their ability to be able to grow others also.
Yeah. When you're growing yourself, it helps you. It helps you grow others. David, you said a lot of them learn leadership development from the workplace versus the church. Oops, somebody just came in. What were some of those examples? Do you remember any specific examples of those that received training from the workplace?
There's at that table, there's several teachers there, several people in the education department, and then they have stepped up into more developed roles. And so that was a huge piece, probably almost half. And
Wow.
then other people in management positions, paralegal positions, things like that. So
Yeah.
as they had to develop themselves into those roles, and then they found them with people that they were leading, whether they knew it or not when they first stepped into those roles, that they were able to transfer some of that into the church space. And they believe that was helping them there on the personal level and leadership development.
you guys may not have talked about this, but just using your imagination, if you didn't talk about this, what do you think those particular leaders that were primarily developed from the workplace, not in their leadership, not from the church, haven't been developed as leaders in the church, but were more developed as leaders in the workplace? What advice do you feel like they would have for the church?
Well, to be honest, this was a brand new conversation for many of them, almost all of them. I'd never been in this kind of meeting or anything like that. But they're very passionate about the church and the development of the church. And I think that what they've seen so far, maybe in the church, just kind of globally, maybe not specific our location, but yes, specific to our location as well, is that the church can many times not be as intentional in its training as their secular jobs, whether they wanted to or not, especially in the education realm, to be pushed into that place of training and deeper, another higher level of training. So they all saw that as one of our challenges, on the local level at the church that we're at, that we are not intentional enough, and they understood that's why we're in this process and a part of this cohort, so that we can become more intentional about that training.
Yeah. How did they respond to the first session as you watched the videos together? What type of response did you get?
They were excited, but it was very sobering to them. So I've been part of a couple church staffs and doing some church training over the last several years and visiting a lot of other churches, and so none of them had had any of that kind of experience. They knew that there was a challenge. They just didn't know how big it was and how overwhelming it was. So we kind of started mapping it out, especially getting into the questions about what does our current process looks like. And they, there was no way for them to define that pipeline or that development process. So it was a very sobering couple of hours that we spent. They came away excited about the future, but they knew right then that we had a lot of work to do as well. So.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be important to, this is what's an advantage for you, is they've tasted the value of leadership development from the marketplace. So they have an appetite for it, so now what if, and this is my vision for every church, that the church becomes the lead leadership developer in the community, that
Absolutely.
Leaders in your church are getting better development. Churches who've gone through this process, some of them have called me back and said, hey, our people are saying they're getting better leadership development from our church than they are their company. And I love hearing that, because the church should be raising up the best leaders on the planet. We've got the best book, and we've got the best leader, and we got the Holy Spirit within us. No reason in the world we shouldn't be raising up world-changing leaders through the local church. We just need more of an intentional process to do that. Somebody else, what's an insight you gained or your team gained through the Math3 conversions exercise?
I can share, Margaret from City on a Hill. I just have a couple things written down that we talked about. The first one was that an insight that we gained was that someone initiated with us. So in our story, either in any of the 3 conversions, there was always somebody that took an interest in us, initiated discipleship with us, parents that influenced us, just kind of faithful people along the way that sort of pushed us and developed us. And then the second one was that formality is better than formal is better than informal. So formal, like a structure, a meaningful sort of goal in discipling somebody is better than sort of informally, I've developed somebody over the years. Those are kind of like 2 things that we talked about the most.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting the way you put that. Informal, the formal is better than the informal. The intentional is better than the unintentional. Why do you think that's the case?
I mean, I think Pastor Dave talked about, like when he was in college, he had, it was either like a pastor or somebody that he was working with in a college ministry, sort of like say, hey, come to my office every Tuesday or whatever, and we'll meet and we'll do something. And that sort of led to more leadership opportunities. But I don't know that he would have had those opportunities if it had just been like a, catch you after church, or go out once a month or something. It was like a weekly thing. This pastor wanted to invest in Dave so that
Yeah.
he could pass something on to him so that Dave could be more equipped. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And in these conversions, we typically find the conversions happen because of a person initiated it in their life, or pain. It's either a person said, hey, come follow me, or it's the pain of, I can't keep doing things the way I'm doing it. This is all going to fall apart. The wheels are going to come off. I got to make a change. I got to figure this out. And so it's one of those two things. And you want your culture to be one where people begin to see potential in people and call that out and invite them in to that leadership development relationship. I heard a friend of mine say the other day, said one of the missing pieces in so many believers' lives today is somebody looking at them and saying, come follow me. And I just thought that was such a great statement and so true. What if more of us looked at somebody and said, come follow me, just come follow me, come learn from me. Let me walk you through this intentional process. And that's what we're going to be working on building out together in our time together. Excuse me. You guys, tip number 3 is be prepared to change your approach to leadership development. Be prepared to change your approach to leadership development. I think in our country, we have been conditioned that dumping information equates to transformation when it doesn't. Dumping information is not the same as transformation. We tend to think, well, I said it, therefore you should get it and should be able to do it. And that just doesn't produce leaders. And so in tip number 3, I talked about, hey, this really is discipleship. Leadership development is discipleship. And in discipleship, we're teaching somebody to live like Jesus. But in leadership development, we're teaching somebody to lead like Jesus. And so we need a combination of both of those things in our church, where we're teaching people just to live like Jesus and walk with Jesus, but also a process to help people lead like Jesus as well. So you'll hear me throughout this entire process continue to refer to this as discipleship. And then tip number 4 was be prepared to put in the work. Be prepared to put in the work. And there I gave you an overview of the process. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the current reality of your structure, and then your system, and then your content, and then your people. We're going to look at the current reality of each one of those. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. That's why I say this has to be an egoless environment. Can't have an ego involved here, because when your ego's so involved, you try to hide the truth in order to protect yourself. We just got to go and say, hey, look, my structure's not perfect. My system's not perfect. I don't have any content. I don't have enough leaders. So we just got to be honest, because unless we're honest and start with reality, we can't change the reality. So I just encourage you, as you go through this process, be patient. You are going to get frustrated at times, but that's not a bad thing. When I was at Dallas Seminary, Dr. Hendricks would give us these challenging, crazy assignments. We'd show up to class and he'd say, gentlemen, are you sufficiently frustrated? And we would go, yeah, we are frustrated. And then he would look at us and say, good, you're learning. And I just learned from him. You learn when you're frustrated, So there are times you're going to wrestle with concepts. You're going to wrestle with some of this. But that's why we do these coaching calls. So you can come on and go, okay, I got a question. This isn't clear to me. Help me out with this. And so I'll be able to coach you through some of those things. But just be patient and put in the work as we go through this process, because it is going to be some work. All right. I want to transition to the culture section. But before we do that, let me ask one more question. Somebody share with me, what's been the most effective leadership development that somebody's done with you? Most effective leadership development somebody's ever done with you. Can somebody share an experience with us? Or who impacted you the most? Who impacted your development as a leader the most? And how did they do that?
I'll share. It would probably be he wasn't my youth pastor. He was the youth pastor at the church. But I served in youth ministry with him. I was directing the college ministry of the church, and and he was over college ministry too. And so, I learned, following his example, a level of professionalism when it came to ministry, that, how things should be done in excellence. I got told off a lot, a lot. But it made me better. He was always kind of stretching, always kind of pushing. The same guy that will tell you off will, call you if he saw that you were having a bad day, and so, but he just approached ministry with a degree of professionalism, not in a sense of, a corporate professionalism, but professionalism in a sense of, if we're doing this for the kingdom, it should be the best we have, and it should set an example. It should set an example, for others, to be able to follow too. And so I think that before that, I didn't, I was young in my 20s. I didn't have that approach. I did my best, but not in a sense of, really just seeing ministry as, that which you should have a certain degree of skill development, respecting, your gifts, your abilities, developing others, and how you develop their gifts. So I think that had a lot of impact on me in my 20s.
Daryl, if you could emulate one thing from him as a developer, what would you want to emulate from his example?
The ability to tell people off without caring about what their feelings are. No, it would, I think it would be his, the compassionate time he would take with people without regard for, how it would benefit him. He generally took time with people because he wanted to see them grow. And he could cast a vision. He was very creative, and he can cast a vision for that a person felt like they could fit into and find their calling and place within that vision. And then he would help you, he would kind of chart a path for you to kind of follow. And so, and as you walked in that path, you made mistakes. He would, correct you when we would have those, areas where we dropped the ball or something like that. But, all of that was a part of the learning process. I literally learned leading in church from him.
Wow. I hear a lesson in there that's really important, because the ability to challenge somebody is very important in the development process. You benefited from the fact that he challenged you, that he would correct you, that sort of thing. You definitely developed and benefited from that. But what's interesting is when I asked you what you would emulate about him, it was his compassion. And what I've discovered is the greater I can demonstrate compassion to somebody, that this is about them, that I'm passionate about them, that I'm sincerely interested in them, that this is for them. It's not for me, it's for them. The more I can demonstrate that compassion, the more permission it gives me to be confrontive. because compassion lays the groundwork. Compassion lays the groundwork for trust. And when trust is established, you can say more challenging and difficult things. But what I've discovered is in the church, many times we're afraid, we'll give positive feedback, but we're afraid to give the confrontive feedback because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or it doesn't feel Christian, but the truth is, if I'm fearful of giving confrontive feedback, it's probably my intuition telling me I've not created an atmosphere of trust with that individual in order to give that confrontive feedback. So one of the first things I want to do in a discipleship, leadership development relationship, I want to lead with selflessness. I want to lead with compassion. I want to lead with genuine interest in them, speaking into their potential, because the more they see I'm for them, the more they will trust me, and the more they will open up their spirit to receive even the more challenging things from me. And I think that's an important lesson for us to learn as disciplers of leaders, because it's difficult to develop somebody without at times looking at them and saying, no, listen, you're looking at that wrong. You're looking at it wrong. Listen to me. Your thinking is wrong. And be able to confront them like that. But when you confront them like that, because you've built the relationship, it feels more like you're coaching their potential rather than criticizing their performance. And that's when it really begins to land in people's spirit. But if I'm always confronting people in a way that's criticizing their performance, it is going to decrease trust. It is going to close their spirit. And that's why we have to learn to provide constructive feedback in a way that feels like, man, this person's coaching my potential, not criticizing my performance. Somebody else, who's been somebody that's, and again, I just want to share some of these things, get some of your examples. And again, we're not filling a notebook. I just want you to capture insights. What is the Holy Spirit surfacing in your heart and mind? What is God wanting you to learn from this experience? Make sure you capture these things. Somebody else, who's had the biggest impact on your leadership development, and how did they do that? Let's do one more.
Hey, Mac, I'll jump in there. The guy who's done it for me was actually one of your old employees, Tom Icahn. So I would say without a shadow of a doubt, Tom has been the most influential person in my life pertaining to leadership in the sphere of influence that I'm currently in. Something that Tom does extremely well was intentionality. So one of the things is, man, I came from a completely different style of church than Tom is currently orchestrating. So when I came in, he was extremely intentional to say, okay, man, let's find out what the grounds that we share are, and let's see what the grounds that we do not share are, and let's make a pact with each other that we'll meet in the middle. And if I rub on you the wrong way, know that I'm not criticizing, but I'm trying to coach. And then it was the intentional things like the styles of influence, saying, hey, let me tell you a little bit about yourself that you may not know, so that as you're coaching others, you know what your flaws are, you know what your high points are, and let me teach you how to see that in other people. And let me teach you how to create a team dynamic where your team feels comfortable sharing difficult things on a consistent basis. And then I would say is his pace of going about things. So, in the church world, things happen a million miles an hour. Yeah. Now, Tom operates a church that is a lot larger than my context, and he has budget that is a lot bigger than what I have in my hands. So for me, some of the problems, I'm like, oh, you can throw money at it, because that'll be an immediate fix of some of the issues. It could be a staffing, it could just be hey, let's throw whatever. But Tom has a way of having a pace that says, regardless of what the problem is, I'm not going to allow the problem to dictate my pace. There's a process and a procedure that I kind of go through, and that intentionality and forethought to never feel rushed, but always to say, okay, man, let me sit back, let me examine, let me go through my checklist. And the fact that he invites me into those processes. So I'm able to see things that are beyond my leadership years, evaluate it, and then have the conversation with them and say, man, if it was me, here's how I would handle it. Why didn't you handle it that way? And then I would say it's consistency. Been at the church for about 2 years. And I can honestly say not about every single week at the same exact time on the same exact date, I meet with Tom. And when I meet with Tom, I never feel like I'm a bother to him. I never feel like our meeting is rushed. Everything goes through and it's a consistent checkup. And he's always have resources that he can give me to further push me where I'm at. So again, your boy, Tom Michael.
Man, I wish I could say that Tom learned that from me, but he didn't. I knew Tom when he was a young man, and I knew Tom before I had my leadership development wake up. And so I worked with Tom, but he was the youth guy. I was more adult ministry, and we were buddies, but there was no development between the two of us. And but he was blessed because he was friends with one of my dear friends, Doug Franklin. And Doug Franklin is the guy that really developed Tom and had that huge impact on him. And Doug is highly intentional leadership developer. But you just gave us 5 things that are just so good. 5 things that Tom did that made him an all-star leadership developer. Number 1, he used an intentional process with you. And I know his roots are in student ministry. And so a lot of what he learned was from Leader Treks and Doug Franklin. Second, he maintained a pace. He didn't let the problem determine his pace. He set the pace. I love that. Third, he helped you identify more and more about yourself. That is so good. Fourth, he was consistent. And Tom probably did learn that from Bob. Bob was our pastor at Pawleys Island, and I met with Bob every single Monday, same exact time, same day of the week, same format. Bob did that with all of us, and that's where I learned that. And Bob was consistent. It was rare for Bob to call and say, "Hey, I got to cancel today's meeting." That just like never happened. And so you felt valued, and you knew the meeting was for you. It wasn't for Bob. It was for you. And he would care for your soul. He would ask you what you were working on. It was just so valuable. And then the 5th thing that I heard you say is he resourced you. He resourced you. Sometimes leadership development, part of leadership development is finding the right resources to put in the hands of those that we're developing. There are times I look at my team and say, I can't teach you X. I can't. I'm not good at it myself. So let me connect you with somebody else that is good with this. Like one of my team members recently, I said, hey, I'm going to connect you with the CFO of such and such company. I just happen to know the CEO, and his CFO is phenomenal. I want to connect you with her, and I want you to do a 45-minute phone interview. Make a list of questions, the things that you want to learn from this individual, because I understand she's really, really good. And I want you to do a 45-minute phone call. I just made the connection, and it didn't cost me but 5 minutes to send an email. And then I got benefited because she got 45 minutes of leadership development because of that resource. Those are the type of things we can do for people that'll be a big, big help. Okay. All right. You guys, we're going to transition into the culture section, but before we do, it's always around this point, because we're together for a couple hours. It's always around this point. We'll take a 4-minute bathroom break, water break. So we're going to take a little break real quick. Be back, in less than 4 minutes, but go grab you something to drink, run the restroom, stretch your legs, and we'll start back in 4 minutes. All right, everybody, if you can hear me, we'll get started back here in just a second. Wait for everybody to hop back on. All right, we're going to pick back up and we're going to jump into the culture section. And here I talked about, you heard me talk about 5 factors for building a culture of leadership development. I was talking about this one time, and a senior pastor came up to me and he said, "Hey, when you say a culture of leadership development, what exactly are you talking about?" And I said, okay, I said, it's when a culture of leadership development is when I intentionally develop somebody, and I take a lot of energy and a lot of focus and intentionally help that person reproduce another leader. And then I'm still giving a lot of attention, a lot of focus to help that person then reproduce another leader. But it's when we hit the 4th generation of multiplication, I don't have to put so much energy and concentration on it, because now it's just the way we do things around here. It's just the way we do things around here. I was talking to one of my churches that went through this process recently, and they were talking about somebody that went outside the system, the leadership development system they built. They sort of violated and went and did some things outside of it. And they said, everybody was like, what are you doing? That's not how we do things around here, because it's ingrained now in this is how we do things. And when somebody tried to do it different, everybody was looking at them like, what are you doing? You messed up. That's not how we do it here. And so a culture of leadership development is when you have identified your leadership development strategy, and it just becomes the way we do it. You don't even have to force it, drive it, that sort of thing. It just sort of, now it's taken a life of its own. And that's when you have a culture of leadership development. In order to do that, number one, you got to pray. You got to pray. I talked about that in the video and showed how Jesus prayed, and he told his 12 and he told the 70, pray the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth workers. He was teaching his guys, pray for leaders, pray for leaders. I want to pray for leaders because I want to see God bring who he wants to bring. I want to pray for leaders because when I pray for leaders, then God will help me see things in people that perhaps I would not see in my own flesh and in my own power. So that's why it's important to pray for leaders. But then secondly is talk about it. Talk about a culture of leadership development. Don't just talk about building leaders, but talk about building a culture of leadership development. And in that section, I talked to you about writing a definition of leadership development. So that was part of your homework. I would love to hear from some of you. You can screen share it if you have it written and you would like to do that, or if you just want to read it to us. I would love to hear some of your definitions of leadership development. Who would like to share with us? What did you come up with? And it might still be rough, and that's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, Mac, I'll go and share ours. It's still pretty rough. The first couple of iterations were really long. So we kind of just combined it with our vision statement. Our vision statement is together we follow Jesus for the sake of others. And so we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want a leadership development process that is an intentional process of growing disciples who follow Jesus together for the sake of others.
Okay. So say that one more time.
Yep, it's an intentional process of growing disciples who follow Jesus together for the sake of others.
Okay.
And sorry, it's handwritten, not typed out, or I would have just screen shared it with you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. What do you like about your definition? You know, if I was to say, hey, I'm gonna make you remove a word from that, what word would you fight me for, fight to keep in your definition of leadership development? What's one of the most important words in that definition?
Now, I got one of our shepherds sitting here beside me, and he said it's for others. The one that we'd fight for is it's for the sake of others. We do this because we're building for the kingdom. It's for the sake of people that don't know Jesus yet, and for those that do know him to continue to grow.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. Great. The leadership development is for the sake of others. It's for the sake of helping someone maximize their calling of who God's called them to be. And it's for the sake of those that don't know Christ yet, for us to raise up leaders that will reach other people. So that's really good. That aspect's good, because what I want to do when I look at these definitions of leadership development is say, okay, if that's your definition, how's it being expressed in the behaviors and actions of your key leaders? So one of the questions I would ask, hey, show me how you are developing somebody, maximizing who they are, maximizing their calling, maximizing who God's made them to be. Show me how your development efforts are maximizing who those other people, who God's called them to be. All right, somebody else, share your definition.
Matt.
Yeah.
Alan Smith from the Bridge and the team here in Venice, Florida. So ours is still a work in progress, but its leadership development is an intentional approach to leading like Jesus while building a culture of multiplication.
Okay. Very good. If I made you remove one word, what word would you fight me for? You're going, nope, I'm not letting you remove this word. Which one would you fight me for?
I think you say there were three key elements we kept trying to work and make sure we're in there: intentional, culture, and multiplication. But also the element that we struggle with the fact that we have read a lot of good definitions that were difficult to discern between secular and the church. And so that's why we really felt the importance of leading like Jesus being in there.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Okay. So yeah, let me take your three elements: intentional, culture, and multiplication. So here's why these definitions are important. There's not a right or wrong on the definitions. It's the value is you as a team unifying what leadership development is, so you know what it looks like. If you don't define it, you don't recognize it. Okay, and so I want you to be able to recognize it. So your key elements are intentional, culture, and multiplication. So if I were sitting with one of your staff, I could say, okay, hey, based on the definition of leadership development, tell me about the intentional process you're using. And I would expect to hear them articulate an intentional process. And then I would say, okay, tell me how over the past year you've built a culture of leadership development in your area of ministry. Tell me the evidences of a culture of leadership development. And I would be expecting some concrete answers from that. And then multiplication. Share with me examples of leaders who have multiplied other leaders, not just staff. Tell me about volunteer leaders who've multiplied other leaders. And now I can have a conversation around the definition to help us recognize, oh yeah, leadership development is happening because you're using an intentional process that shaped your culture, and multiplication is happening not because of one person, but because of multiple people. So So yeah, that's good. That works. Somebody else, anybody else have a definition you want to run by us? All right, well, keep working on those. And like I said, as you work through it and you define it and you get it written down, underline 3 to 5 keywords, 3 to 5 keywords, and you should be able to have a conversation with a staff person or key leader about those 3 or 5 words to get them to describe how leadership development is happening in their area of ministry. I think I shared mine on the video. Leadership development is an intentional process. That's important to me, intentional process in which one interacts with an experienced leader producing transformation. That's another key word for me. Transformation in the character and competencies that increase their ability to lead like Jesus. Lead like Jesus. That's another key component for me. Increase their ability to lead like Jesus and influence people, outcomes, and culture. So increasing their influence, that's another key element for me in my definition of leadership development. So again, the key here is hopefully this will help you identify when leadership development is being done. It gets you on the same page with your team so that when you're talking about leadership development, you're talking about the same thing because you get the same definition. All right. Step number 3 or factor number 3 in building a culture of leadership development is modeling. Leadership development has to be modeled. It can't just be something we expect others to do. Can't just be a goal that we set. It's got to be modeled from the executive level. And I was working with a church one time. I did my very first on-site with them. I was there from 9 to 4 that day. The senior pastor stood up, kicked off the day, introduced me, walked out of the room, and never came back. And I was like, it's never going to happen here. It's never going to happen here because he's not committed to it. He's not participating in it, and he's certainly not going to model it. And so it's so important that it's modeled from the top. Culture flows down. It doesn't flow up. You heard me talk about that on the video. Culture flows down. So I want to get leadership development going at my staff level. Here's what I want. I want my key leaders around me, whether they're paid or volunteer. I want my key leaders around me to so benefit from the development that I do with them that they have a burning conviction in the value of leadership development. It is so deep and it's so rich in them, they can't help but turn around and develop those around them. They have been blessed because of leadership development, therefore they will bless others with leadership development. So I go so far to say, if someone is not doing leadership development, they're going to give you a million reasons. I'm too busy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if somebody's not doing leadership development, I go so far to say that it's because they don't have the conviction that it works. Because if I got a conviction that Jesus works, so I'm going to share Jesus all I can because I got a conviction that he changed my life. Well, it's the same thing with leadership development. If I have a true conviction, man, this is the way we're going to grow this ministry, it's the way we're going to grow people, then I can't help it. I got a conviction, therefore that conviction leads to action. So has to be modeled well. Now in this section, we ask you to come up with your strengths. What are the strengths that your church has around leadership development? And so I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some things you're doing well with leadership development? And some of you may be doing some things we could really learn from. So what did you come up with when you worked on your strengths around leadership development?
I'll go. I think one of the strengths that we've been able to capitalize on is kind of the strength of necessity in church planning is uncovering potential. That people are coming to church or in ministry, they have a heart for the Lord at least. And they may be coming from no church background or some church background or from a different church background. And when you're coming to a church planning environment, you don't have the ability, you don't have the luxury of, having pew sitters like, wait, you mean you sang a song one time 25 years ago? Come on, you're on praise team this week. and so just being able to uncover, potential in people, asking them questions and finding trying to find an alignment where they may fit on the bus, and being willing to try, and then having a process to move them around when you find, that's not their, area of strength. I think that's served us, to keep up the hat so that we're functional, where we can say, okay, how can we, we're having these challenges in our AV area, but our guys are not sound engineers. And so, we'll, invest in training for them, but they know enough to, be able to turn the volume on and off. They know enough to be able to, connect all the sound equipment. But the guys that's running the live stream now never touched, Blackmagic sound system and all, they never touched these things before, and just to kind of take that passion and a little bit of technical knowledge of on-off buttons and, get them so at least we're, operating. And so I think just aligning, being able to uncover potential or cultivate, enough, so it has been something that's, served us pretty decently up until now.
Yeah, that necessity, Daryl, I remember it's probably the first 3-4 years of my church plant. I remember just dialed in, looking, everybody that walked through the door, you're looking at their potential, you're looking at their giftedness, you're looking at their ability, you're so dialed in. But then I remember our church got to a point where I was like, hey, there for the first 3 or 4 years, you're like, this thing could shut down any day,
Right.
Everybody could just stop showing up. And I know there's a decent number of people here right now, but I still am not confident that we're going to be open next week,
Right.
And you live that way for a few years, but then all of a sudden you get this critical mass and you begin to relax, and all of a sudden that necessity isn't as high, and your hunger decreases, and so your vision at looking at people that way decreases. I think it's really good. It's how do you maintain that strength, that hunger of identifying people, and that's something older churches really need to re-spark that spirit in them. That's good. Somebody else, what's another strength you identified as you looked at leadership development in your church?
Yeah, so when we talked about this at our last core team meeting, one of the things that we've really been, my prayer has been that prayer would be a strength for our church plant, to seeing how incredibly powerful that is and needed in church planning. And so without any kind of like trying to fish that out, that was something that was brought up. Our core team actually said that that was probably our core strength right now is prayer, that we're really intentional about prayer. And so I that was super, that kind of warmed my heart. That was something I was excited about, but it was really cool to see our team identify that as a strength.
Wow. Tell us a little bit, what does that look like expressed? When you say, prayer is one of our strengths when it comes to leadership development, it's the first factor I listed in the culture. So I'm glad you listed that. What does that look like fleshed out?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of talk to you a little bit about a conversation I had with our worship director. And so we were talking about who could be in the band and who are some people we know. And the big thing that we really identified was the first thing we should do before we, as we start making a list and thinking about who could be on this team, is to pray. And let's pray over them, but then let's pray for the person that God may be calling into the team that would be even a better fit. And so that's become something that we really have identified that we need to do when, as we start to go through this process is, okay, first we're going to stop and we're going to pray.
Yeah.
We're going to pray over the place that we're going to be at. We're going to pray over the equipment we need. We're going to pray over the people that God's going to bring in and the development that's going to happen. And so just putting that first, and that's not how everything's always been for us, but just seeing that that's becoming part of our culture has been really, really fun.
Love it. There's a church I was working with, and I went into their office one day, and they had a giant wall. And this half of the wall had a bunch of 3x5 cards on it, just all down the wall. And it had their leadership pipeline on the side, but then all these cards at different levels. And at the top of this side, it said prayer request. On this side, it said praises. And there were 3x5 cards over there. What it was on this side, when it said prayer, it would say small group leader. This was positions they needed. Small group leader. There was like 6 cards, 6 blank cards, 2 small group coaches, 2 cards up there. As they would pray over that and recruit for that, they would take, when they get a new small group leader, they'd take the card, move it over to the praise side, take a picture of the person, put their face on it, put their name and information on it. And they were praying over their leadership pipeline. I was like, this is so cool. What a great way to look at it. Prayer and praise, and with the names, with the empty spaces, and then the names of those who were filling their pipeline, seeing how God answered. That's really cool. Somebody else, what's a strength that you identified when it comes to leadership development? Is there anything tangible anybody's doing that you go, hey, we're doing something and it's actually working in helping develop some of our leaders? Anybody doing a, in-house conference? Anybody doing like leader huddles or leader labs or rallies or workshops? Anybody doing anything like that? Apprenticing?
So one of the things we started after Orlando, because I left Orlando with hey, if we're going to get there, we're going to get there through leadership and cultivating leaders. And so we started doing Fifth Sundays where we wouldn't have service, wouldn't have worship at all. That Sunday would just be leadership development, leadership training. I'm kind of evaluating how we'll move forward with that, because we may be restructuring, to really focus on a smaller group of leaders, more intentionally developing a smaller group of leaders. But I think that the thought was, let's cast as much vision as possible, get as many people involved as possible, surface leaders that may not have even considered in the past, leading and serving in church. But, so on those Sundays, regardless of who came, we're training and teaching on leadership. And we would do team builders. We, have our, white paper on the walls and all those types of things, with everybody that came. And everybody, the few times we've done it so far, it's been, it seemed we haven't had time to measure the results yet, but it seemed to be something that piqued a lot of interest.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah. Keep doing that. And then when we get to the system set of videos, you're going to articulate an intentional leadership development strategy. At that point, you might go, yeah, hey, we want to keep doing this and leverage it this way. Or you might go, hey, that served us well for a while, but now we're going to build out this leadership development strategy. But yeah, that's good at that. When you watch that set of videos, it'll help you see how you might be able to better intentionalize that. Okay. All right, let's talk through challenges. When you, Jake, did you raise your hand? Sorry. No. Oh, okay. All right, let's talk through challenges. One of the things you talked through was you built a wall of challenges. What is keeping you, what's keeping your church from building more and better leaders? So what were some of the challenges that you came up with? I think we asked you. to
I can I can step in. Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So the church that that I'm working with right now is 112 years old, in a very small community, and it comes from a very traditional denominational background. And so one of the key top two, besides the lack of a developmental system, which is why we're here, right?
Yeah.
That they shared with me is the traditional thinking of entitlement, sitting versus serving. And I think someone already said it earlier, either Richard or Daryl, the fact that COVID produced a lot of consumers instead of contributors. So that's kind of become entrenched. People who are faithful to come into the house of God, but may not be faithful to, take the next step in serving in some capacity. So if they're not serving, they're obviously not stepping into a leadership role. And the lack of urgency, it's almost a complacency. And I think probably every church deals with that to some degree with people. So, but this particular team of leaders felt like a lot of that had to do with a very traditional mindset of I'll come, I'm keeping a scorecard of being here on Sunday or Wednesday or whatever, and just going about doing life and not kind of stepping into that next level of involvement.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Here's what I want to do, everybody. And I want to do this with several of you. So David, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that one that you labeled complacency. Okay. We're going to take complacency, and let's say that we want to eliminate complacency in that culture. Okay. Now I want everybody to participate in this. Okay. Because point number 5 in building a culture of leadership development is you have to learn how to fight the excuses. You have to learn to fight the challenges or fight the excuses. So I want us to throw some punches at this excuse. All right. So let's say that each and every one of you, let's say that complacency was one of the biggest challenges you face. How do we eliminate that sense of complacency that's keeping people from being developed as leaders and developing leaders? What are some ideas? Just throw out some ideas. If you had to eliminate that spirit of complacency, what are some things you would do? Anybody?
Like asking, where do they see the ministry going? What do they see in the future?
Yeah. Asking them, where do they see the vision? Make them articulate some vision. See how much vision they have. That's a great answer. Somebody else.
Probably along the similar lines, but goal setting, like coming up with some targets and what are we going to go after and hill that we're going to take.
Yeah. If there's nothing out ahead of you, why run, right? If there's no finish line tape to look at, it's hard to be motivated. But if you got some goals that people are bought into, now it raises that sense of momentum. All right, what else? That's good.
I think we've got to tell stories of people who are following a call and have passion and are intent. I make that mistake so much preaching, as I preach a good message, or at least I think I do, and then I forget that God's already got this happening in our church. We need to have people share the story of where God's already doing this. And then, people change because they hear stories, right?
Oh,
and they go, I can do that too.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Stories stick, stories spread, and stories shape culture. That's why stories are so important, and we underutilize them. Stories stick. Man, it sticks in their head. They spread. I tell churches all the time, find the legendary leadership development stories in your culture and tell those stories that'll stick and spread, because those will help shape your culture. All right, somebody else. So we're going to ask them to articulate the vision. We're going to set some goals that they can emotionally identify with. We're going to tell stories that'll help shape the culture. What else can we do to eliminate complacency?
One of our responses to this within its own group was to fuel new people, new converts, younger people with a sense of mission. It goes back to the whole lower room, upper room thinking, to get them to move past the traditional way of people, place, personality, and program into a place of upper room thinking where it's driven by pure mission. And that's a shift in culture for this particular group. That there's a lot of new people coming in that are like first generation Christians, first generation believers, people who are coming in through their recovery program who have no sense of the traditional, that a lot of people. So one of the things that we discussed was to fuel them with mission that they can move past some of that, younger generation, newer converts, etc.
That's fantastic, David. Yeah, taking the new people because they're more moldable, they're more excited, they're more adaptable. But so many times we look at the frozen, hard, concrete people and go, and things are never going to change. And we ignore the adaptability of the few that are the new that are coming in. And so that's a great point. Fuel the new, fuel that DNA in the new people. One more. How do we fight this complacency?
I would say change the familiarity. Get away from this is what we've always done to something new. Give us something to strive for. Especially in a small town like we are in of 10,000. There's a lot of traditions in it, and that's the way that we've always done it. Well, that doesn't mean that's the way we have to do it now.
Yeah. And sometimes something new can be a little exciting. I grew up in a small town too. And so, somebody got a new car. That was exciting. Everybody, oh, look, they got a new car. Something new. It's exciting because in little towns like that, there's not much new, And so that's a great idea. Point out something new or create something new that'll generate some excitement. And then the last thing I would add is, work with the early adopters, identify your early adopters and change your culture based on early adopters. All right. Now, somebody else, what were the top 2 challenges you identified in your church? So thank you so much, David, for sharing that. All right. So what we're doing, we just identified a challenge. We just threw about 6 punches at that challenge. Somebody else, what's a challenge you came up with as you looked at the leadership development in your church?
A couple challenges we had were one was like fear of drift, kind of moving away from who we are or the mission, or not in a good way. And then another one was, I think several of us identified that we hadn't seen this modeled before. And so we get the concept, but we've never been a part of a healthy leadership development culture. And so, we're trying to create something that we haven't actually experienced ourselves.
Okay, fantastic. Let's take that one. All right. So, hey, everybody, again, we're going to pretend we're one church and we're going, hey, we've never seen this model. We've never seen leadership development modeled, but yet we got to go do this. Okay. And our biggest challenge is we've not really seen a healthy model. So how can we eliminate this challenge? Let's throw 5 or 6 punches at this one. What are some ideas you guys have?
One of the things we're working on right now is developing a mentor-mentee role.
And what does that look like?
So that looks like, Pastor Richard was talking about how a lot of folks are, facing burnout. And so you have like this rotation of some folks are kind of stepping down from leadership and you have some new ones that's emerging, but in order to protect them, it's important for us to not have them feel like they have to do everything. So it's, hey, you have a lot on your plate. Okay, now who are you bringing on board to help you with those things? And so now you're kind of helping, they're helping you, but then you're also looking at those ones who have that leadership quality.
Yeah.
Also allowing them to help you, and you're developing them at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, we're going to begin to identify some mentees that can begin to apprentice under some of our leaders. It's going to take some of the weight off of their shoulders a little bit, but it's, if we do it right or we do it wrong, at least we're trying to do this leadership development, and we'll, as long as we're, learning from it, we will get better at this. So that's a good one. Identify specific mentors and mentees. What's something else we can do? If we go, we want to eliminate this excuse, we've never had it modeled. What are some other things we can do to eliminate that excuse?
This may be along the same lines, but I would just say, kind of like what we've had to do here, start small, and I think that's what she was just saying, start small, if we can model it even one-on-one as leaders in a discipleship stance. We all know that this is all discipleship, but if we could just model that and let it be visible without being obvious, but start small, one-on-one, one-on-two, or kind of a micro discipleship type process. I think that because I know that's one of our challenges here as well. We have healthy leadership at the senior level, and it's good from the senior level to an upper level, but from that upper level of leadership, there's none down. So that's why there's such a struggle to identify the process. So if that upper level of leaders can start small, right, with one or two people. So, it's kind of like I told you, Matt, my message, we started this summer and we bought 40 copies of Leading Others.
Yeah.
So they would have an excuse to buy their own copy, and gave it to them, bought them dinner and gave it to them and said, guess what? Have the first 2 modules done by July 1st and expect a Zoom call. So that's how we're starting. It's small, but that's where we're starting. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And so great tip, just get started. I was working at church through this process one time, and we were pretty far into the process, and I met with some of their staff, and they weren't really doing anything with this. And I began to ask why, and they were like, they're very young staff. Nobody's ever developed me. Nobody's ever developed me. I was like, oh, so I told the senior leaders, time out. All right, let's go back. Now, so they bought some copies of Leading Others, and I said, put your staff in triads, and over the next several weeks, just let them experience it. Let them, just like you're saying, hey, let's do this. So we divided the staff into groups of 3s, and gave them the book and said, all right, just start doing this with each other. Start learning, and pick one facilitator per triad. And they walked through that over several weeks. And next thing you know, they're going, oh, this is what it feels like. This is what it looks like. This isn't as bad as difficult as I thought. All right. So yeah, start small. What's something else we can do?
I would say implement leadership development in the culture. I think you just alluded to it. So whether that's a training as part of your team meeting, maybe once a month, and I would say maybe find a church that is already doing it, or find somebody in your organization that's kind of know someone, maybe a guru in that field, and then create markers within yourself that you want to accomplish by a certain amount of time.
Okay. Yeah. Great couple tips there. Find an example, and then create some milestones. What do we want to say? Hey guys, let's all complete 2 sessions in the next 4 weeks, or hey, let's all identify 2 potential people that we could begin to mentor, something like that. Identifying some of those marks and measurables. Anything else you can think of? If hey, we've never done this before, so what else can we do to eliminate that excuse?
got to be consistent. Richard's hitting on it right already there, but it's that whole principle of if you're going to speak vision or speak something new, once you're tired of it, you've just gotten started. You just keep talking and talking and sharing and building, and don't. I think a lot of us we try to throw something at the wall and it doesn't stick the first time, but we know it's what God wants us to do, and it's easy just to move on and go, well, that didn't work, and get discouraged. But this is discipleship. We know this is our one call, right? This is the one thing. And I've needed that reminder lately, and that, as Richard was talking, that's what I was thinking of. So just kind of adding to his thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. Be consistent. You know, I was talking to a guy one time, and I was saying, hey, tell me about you got the development up and going. Tell me how it's going. He said, well, yeah, I did my first session with my 2 guys, and then we didn't do another one for a month, and then we did that next one, and we really hadn't put the next one on the calendar. And I was like, oh no, you know, this is the beauty of doing this in Triad. You can do it anytime, any place, any pace. But if you spread it out so far, well, we meet, we hadn't met for 6 weeks. You're communicating, this isn't important. It's not a priority. And so that's why you want to keep that consistency. Yeah, I mean, it happens to me all the time. I meet one session, 2 weeks later, we meet again, 2 weeks later, we meet again, but then, I'm traveling, so we can't meet for 3 weeks. Those things are going to happen, but you want to maintain a level of consistency that shows that it's a priority. And because they won't value it if we don't value it. And then I'm going to add one more that I think is so important, and it's sharing best practices. Once you go through the system section and you identify your leadership development strategy, one of the things you want to do is every once in a while, a staff meeting, let's say you're using the apprenticing approach to develop new leaders. Every once in a while, you want to sit around staff meeting and say, who are you apprenticing? How's it going? What are you learning? What's going well? What's not going well? What are you learning? That type of thing, and learn from each other. I've literally sat around the staff room table with churches and had this conversation and said, who are you developing? What's going well? What's not going well? What are you learning? And we just sit there for an hour or two and just learn from each other's experience and examples. And it's really, really powerful way to continue to get better at this. So it's not just getting experience, it's getting evaluated experience that's going to help you learn and grow in this. Okay, guys, any questions that you have from any of the content today? Any questions that you wrote down or thinking that you'd like to ask before I review next time's work? Any questions? All righty. Well, let me screen share, and I'm going to walk you through what we're going to do, or what you're going to be working on for next time. Let me find it. Here we go. Okay, our next session is August 16th. So between now and you've completed the introduction, you've completed the culture. So what you're going to do this time is you're going to do the structure section. So here's some downloads that you're going to need. When you look at these downloads, you don't need all of them. You need the depth chart and the 5-level worksheet. You don't need the 6 level, so you can ignore that one. So download the depth chart and the defining levels worksheet. Excuse me. Whoops. And then in this section, you're going to watch, you're going to assess the health of your existing structure. It's a 4-minute video. And the exercise following that is going to take you a good 30, 45 minutes, okay? So you're going to look at the current reality of your structure. Each ministry is going to draw up, put a giant post-it up. So you'll need the giant post-its and Sharpies. And every ministry will draw their organizational chart, the current reality of your org chart. And so you're going to draw what it looks like. You're going to label it with the terms director or coordinator, coach, leader, whatever you call each level. And after each ministry draws that, you're going to put it up next to each other and you're going to compare it to each other. And you're going to say, where's our structure healthy? Where's it not healthy? You're going to look at it like an organizational chiropractor and say, okay, where's our structure healthy and where's it not healthy? And so you'll assess the current reality of your structure. Now, part of that in doing your structure, you're going to put, on your chart, you're going to draw out how many people report to you. So if you're the student director, how many leaders report to you, or how many coaches, or whatever your structure is, and very oftentimes you're going to see somebody going, wow, I've got 27 people that report directly to me. No wonder I'm overwhelmed. That's too many people. I've had as many as 110 people reporting to one staff person, and they're just overwhelmed. That's too much. So this step 1 is going to give you a good picture of your current health. Step 2 and 3, you're going to begin to understand the leadership pipeline framework. Steps 4 and 5, you're going to begin to assemble your leadership pipeline, and you're going to label it. You're going to put terms on each level. Each one of you are going to be 5 levels. So I'll just give you that in advance because of your size. And so, and then you'll watch this video on the advantages of having an aligned structure. And then right here, you're going to see some structure examples. And so you'll see some graphic examples of other churches of a graphic design. You're more than welcome to download those and make those your own, use those, or come up with your own graphic example. But as you'll see, this is a 4-minute video, 16-minute video, 1-minute video, 2 minutes, and almost 5 minutes. So there's not a lot of videos, but there are some exercises here. So this is going to be about a 3-hour session for you and your team. So I would allot about that much time to really work this through. And then you're going to fill out that defining levels worksheet, which puts all the positions required to run your area of ministry on one page. So you'll see every position it requires to run your church on one page. And then your depth chart is you'll notice when you download that Excel spreadsheet, there are different tabs that go across the bottom, and there's a different tab for every ministry. And so what you're going to do is you're going to put the names of people at each level of your pipeline. So who's in your pipeline? How many team members do you have? How many leaders do you have? How many leaders of leaders? Who's the director over that area ministry? So each area ministry is going to fill in that depth chart to give you an idea of how many people you have and how many you would need if your church were to grow by 10 to 15% in the next year. So there's a little column there says, how many do we have? That's your current reality. How many do we need based on a 10 to 15% growth? And you'll put that in there. And that's going to be an extremely helpful tool for you. So, so that'll be your homework for next time. Any questions about your homework and about the upcoming structure section? All righty. Well, guys, thank you for your participation today. Remember, feel free to invite anybody and as many people from your team onto these calls, and they can ask questions too. Trust me, you're going to have some questions on the structure section. And when we're together next time, I'm going to have you screen share, and you're going to screen share your defining levels worksheet so that I can look at it and give you feedback. And I'll be asking you what the names of the levels of your pipeline are. And but come prepared to ask questions about the leadership pipeline, because the structure is the foundation to the whole thing. We got to get this right. And so come prepared with your homework and your questions, and I will see you guys on August 16th. All right. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me today.